Football Manager is a game where things can very easily go wrong. The wrong sign-in, the wrong tactic, the wrong conversation with a player can completely throw your save in jeopardy. You lose your job, you go home, you cry, you shut your laptop, and you never play Football Manager again. Obviously, that's a very extreme circumstance, but we'll be hoping in today's video we can help you from ever feeling like that by giving you 5 mistakes that you should avoid in FM24. That's right, today we'll be looking at 5 of the most common mistakes that Football Manager players are making, whether they're experienced or new to the game. Some people will be doing these without even knowing they're doing anything wrong. Some of these can make or break a save, some of them can have very minor effects but will really help you out in the long run. We'll get right into it in a second, but before we do, if you go on to enjoy this video or you just really want to be nice and help the content out, then please go ahead and smash that like button for us. It really does help us out here on YouTube, and subscribe if you haven't already. We've just hit 170k subs, which is amazing. Thank you guys for that, and we're going to keep pushing eventually for that 200k mark. So daily Football Manager content, make sure you're subscribed for that, and comment down below your biggest mistake or the mistake you see people making the most in Football Manager. That way we'll have a big list in the comments that people can read and hopefully help them out in their saves. With that being said, let's get into the first mistake that you should avoid in FM24. So the tips in this video will apply to pretty much every Football Manager game so far and aren't specifically unique to FM24, but this one, the first one we're covering, is maybe the one that is most impacted in this game, and that is, at the minute, I don't know if you guys have played FM too much this year, but injuries are absolutely rife in your saves. We've had screenshots sent to us of people that have 5 players in their midfield and all 5 are injured. It even goes as far this year as goalkeepers getting injured, meaning you actually have to have a goalkeeper on the bench. So I guess the first tip is this year, make sure you've got a goalkeeper on the bench. In previous years, a lot of us wouldn't have one and would have, a midfielder on there instead, but this year it really is crucial that you do have a goalkeeper, because even if you think it won't happen to you, it will happen to you at some point. Your keeper will get injured 10 minutes in, you ain't got one on the bench, and suddenly things aren't going to go well for you when you've got your right back playing goalkeeper. So yes, obviously have a goalkeeper on the bench, but the main tip here with the injuries this year is really make sure you are rotating your squad. It's so easy, even if you're in just one competition, to think I just need to play my first 11, that's it. No, you really need to make sure you are monitoring your players' fitness this year more than ever. Obviously the first part of that is making sure when you're picking your team from this tactics screen that everyone that is going to play has good conditioning and sharpness. You don't want to be playing someone that looks, say, like this, Miguel Aziz. Don't play a player when they're not fit enough to play if you can avoid it, and head to the medical centre more than you would have done before. To be honest, this is something that I never used to touch in Football Manager, never came to the medical centre at all, but it's something you should definitely be keeping an eye on this year. Before you pick your team for each game, it could be a good idea to take a look at this. I mean, Charlie Cresswell, even when he was on the tactics screen, he looked like he was perfect and ready for the game, right? But then when we go to the medical centre, you can see he's got a high injury risk because he's got a lot of match fatigue from playing a lot recently, and that isn't something that we would have seen just by looking at that screen. So make sure you're checking out the medical centre, analysing the risks, and it's definitely going to save you some headaches in the long run. This next tip is a single button press, which is going to save you a lot of money in your saves in the long run. Very easy to do, takes a few seconds like I say, and let's use an example here. It's about when you try and sign a player in the game, particularly younger players. You'll notice a lot of the time the AI will force you into having a percentage of profit from your next sale. So let's take this player here, Yasin Ozcan here. If we go ahead and try and sign him and click suggest terms at 5 million, what this will do is this team will come back with a negotiated fee, of course, but near enough always with a younger player, they will whack in one of these, percentage of profit from next sale or percentage of next sale, meaning when you eventually sell this player on, they are going to take a cut of the fee. But the worst part is, you'll see here, when we suggest it, there you go, they've included one. We can negotiate this down, but we can't get rid of it, and that's very annoying because that means now no matter what we negotiate this to, even if we got this down to a penny, and in installments of £1 million, there's still going to be this percentage of profit from next sale that we can't get rid of. Meaning if we sell him for a profit, as you will with a lot of your younger players, they are going to take a huge cut of the fee. Now we can get around this and avoid this from happening, so let's try and do this again. If we cancel the offer, then go ahead back to Ozcan, we go ahead and before we suggest terms, go to percentage of profit from next sale, click this little arrow here, and then remove and exclude from negotiations. This will mean Kasim Passer here, the club that we're trying to buy this guy from, they won't be able to include that in the negotiation at all when we suggest it, as you can see. Now that will mean they'll likely ask for a little bit higher of a fee. Sometimes it's only 5 or 10% more on the transfer fee that you would have had to have paid originally, which can be a lot for some bigger transfers. But when you think about that percentage of profit from the next sale, if we signed him for 10 million, sold him for 42 years later, but they had a 40% of profit of the original sale clause, they will be taking over £10 million of that sale that we make. So you want to try and make sure that isn't included before you make an offer, particularly for a young player. Click on the percentage of profit from the next sale, hit that arrow and remove and exclude. That will make sure that they can't use it in their transfer negotiations. So yes, make sure you remove and exclude that percentage of profit from next sale button, and that'll make sure in the future of your save, you save yourself a hell of a lot of cash. Before we continue, just to let you know, this save that we're doing here is a Sheffield Wednesday save, which is part of a rebuild that we did on my channel, which you can find linked in the description. My name is Jake, and if you enjoy my content here on the FM Scout channel, you might enjoy it over there as well. Over there, we do more entertainment style videos, lots of Football Manager rebuilds, as well as YouTube shorts about wonderkids you might not have heard of. So if that sounds interesting, or you just want to be nice and come on over and hit the subscribe button as we push for 30k by the new year, I'd massively appreciate it. But let's get back to tip number 3. Now, this is one that I swear by, and I think a lot of players, particularly newcomers to FM, they can kind of be confused about this, and I can see why. But when you're making a tactic, of course, in Football Manager, you can click in possession, in transition, and out of position. And in those sections, you can select everything that you want your team to do, whether it's dribble less, be more disciplined. And it's very easy, particularly for new players, to think that they need to select something in every section. You know, they might think, okay, I don't want the standard width, I want to change to this, I want to overlap the left and overlap the right, I want to shoot on sight and hit early crosses, I want to run at the defence but be more disciplined, I want shorter passing directness, never time waste in transition, I want to do X, Y, Z. You get the idea. It's very easy to think that you need to select everything, but let me tell you, that is not the way that you should be going in Football Manager. In fact, the more instructions that you have for your team, the more likely chance you've got of confusing those players. What you're basically doing is saying they must play in a certain way. It doesn't need to be that way. For example, if we took be more disciplined or be more expressive, 9 times out of 10, no matter the scenario, your players will try and be disciplined and won't be expressive. But if you didn't choose be more disciplined and you left it blank, what would actually happen is the players would use their own decision making to make up their mind of when it's a good time to be expressive and when it's a good time to be disciplined. And that is so important in FM, particularly if you've got high quality players. They'll all have a decision making attribute. Take Tino Andrin, he's got a decision making of 14, so he'll make the right decisions more often than not. Kemen has got it at a rating of 12. So what you're doing here is allowing your players to make the right decisions in game depending on the scenario, instead of being forced into playing a certain way. Now, of course, you can go out and be as creative as you want with your tactics. If that's the way you want your team to play, then go for it. But you can actually confuse your players more than you're helping them by adding so many instructions. On top of that, tactics in general, try and hit this button as often as you can, the analysis button. That will show you where you're weak in certain areas in the tactic. The more green the box is, the better that area of space is covered on the pitch. The darker a certain grid is, the worse you are covering that area. For example, we have got a little bit behind Tino Andrin here where we're not covered very well, and I would imagine, if I remember right, it's because he's a Mazzala on the attack duty, so he's floating forward there. Calvin Ramsey's going forward on the right, and that's leaving a little bit of space there that no one's progressing into. If we put that as a central midfielder on the support duty instead, and then go to analysis, you can see we're covering that area a little bit better. It doesn't mean a central midfielder is the better role to have, it's just something to keep an eye on, particularly if you're playing a tactic that's a little bit crazy and isn't very symmetrical. For example, something like this, then you hit the analysis button, you will see there's a lot of red boxes, and that is a clear indication that there might be something up with a tactic. That's not to say that this couldn't work, but it's just something to keep an eye on when you're doing your tactics. Sometimes simple is better. This next mistake is one that I really firmly believe in Football Manager, and it's something that I actually covered in last year's version of this video as well, but I need to make sure enough people are knowing about this, and that is all to do with player prompts and dynamics. Now, if you've watched a few videos on the FM Scout channel, you know how important I believe dynamics is. I think it's as important as the transfers that you make and the tactics you use with your club. I think dynamics is of equal importance to those three. If you have all three, then you've got the holy trinity, of course, and that's what you want to aim for in your saves. But sometimes, of course, players get upset. Sometimes it's hard to avoid, but I think the big thing that Football Manager players miss is the player prompts that are going to indicate if someone is going to get upset or not. Now, there's two ways that I mean this. The more difficult way to try monitoring your save is keeping an eye on every single player's happiness across the course of your save to make sure you're doing everything to keep the players you want to be happy in your club. Luca Romero here and Chet Decore want to start more games. They're fairly upset, but we could have avoided that earlier by going to that happiness section and having a look at anybody that has issues, basically. And that can be any area, whether they think training isn't good enough, whether they think the manager's treatment of them isn't good enough, their playing time, and you can see see this by going down these boxes. All of these players here are very happy, satisfied, that's fine. Anywhere that there's a red, that's somewhere where we need to do something. So check the Corre and Luca Romero. You can see they're asking to leave and they're devastated. That was because they didn't get enough playing time and now they want to leave the club. But if we had checked this a few months earlier, this wouldn't have been red. This would have been orange. It would have been yellow. It would have been an indicator that that player is looking for more game time. So without even having to have a conversation with them, you can start to feed them a few games here and there, and hopefully that will sort out the players' dynamics before it becomes an issue. But I get it, not a lot of people want to go in and manage players' happiness as detailed as this and keep an eye on everything as often as I would suggest you should do, but there is something it's very easy to do that can get rid of maybe half of the issues you get at your club, and that is when you try and sell a player who is important to the team and doesn't want to leave. If we have a look at the hierarchy of a club, if you don't know how it works, the more important a player is, the more likely if you upset them that unrest is going to thread through the team. For example, if we upset Rodrigo here or Nagalo, that unrest is going to filter through the team and all of a sudden you'll have a big problem, whereas on the other hand, if we upset Constantelias here, there's a good chance that no one really is going to care all that much and it will just be him that gets upset. And there's one common way that a lot of us upset these team leaders, and that is when you try and sell them. Now, so many of us want to come into a club and sell players on as quickly as possible, the players we don't want, but there's a reason that doesn't happen in real life, and that's because certain players can get upset and it can cause unrest in the dressing room. Now, I would never sell Rodrigo here, but let's say we were going to, you could go out, you could click offer via transfer room. What would then happen is in a few days, Rodrigo would come to you and say, boss, why have you offered me out? I'm devastated. And even if you say sorry, he's still going to be upset. Now, we could have avoided this if we just looked in the top left of the screen, because it would tell us up here that my client may not react well to being offered to other clubs. And that is a very clear indicator that if you do this and try and offer him out, he is going to get upset. It doesn't always happen, but I'd say 7 out of 10 times here, if you offer out a player who doesn't want to leave, that's going to upset their morale. And particularly if you're doing this to a team leader, you can, in one click of a button, completely upset the dynamics and the harmony of your team. And sometimes it's best just to have a look at this and go, okay, how long has he got left on his contract? Maybe we let his contract expire. Maybe we don't play him as often over the course of a season, so he's a bit more willing to leave. All of these things you can take into account. You can even go as far as talking to the player himself before you offering him out and say, look, I wanted to let you know that I'm planning to let you go. And he can tell you how he feels about that before it becomes a big deal. We can see here with Rodrigo, he isn't interested in wanting to leave. It doesn't sit with him. We could go ahead and try and convince him, but that might make it more of a problem. Instead, I could just say, okay, I like the passion you've shown. Stay at the club. That's fine. The good thing about having the conversation beforehand is even after doing this, because we back down before actually offering him out, Rodrigo hasn't really had an effect on his morale. It's still perfect. Whereas if we'd offered him out and then said, sorry, let's put you back in the team, we're not going to sell you, his morale would definitely have been affected and we might have a problem. So it's something to keep an eye on. Make sure you're taking note of the player prompts that the game gives you. Keep an eye on when players are becoming unhappy, and that way you can have your club atmosphere looking as good as we do here. And now we're on to the final common mistake. And when I first talk about this, don't be too scared straight away. I know I was when this first got introduced to Football Manager. I thought it's something I'm never going to use. And don't get me wrong, I don't use it all the time, but don't discount the data hub. Now, I've spoke about this in a few different videos over the years in Football Manager, and you still get that little bit of hesitancy when it comes to the data hub, because a lot of people, they look at these graphs and they think, oh my God, what's going on? I don't know what any of it means. And to be honest with you, I don't look at these either. Don't worry about it. We're fine. I'm sure there's people who get amazing use out of this and can find loads of stuff about where a tactic is falling and where it's good, but I'm not going to look at that. The thing that I suggest you use a data hub for is all about your next opponent, and it's particularly great this year. If we go to next opponent and then overview, you'll just get some really good information about the next team that you're facing, and you can really easily make some tactical tweaks, and it just lets you know what you're coming up against. Everything from knowing Liverpool's style to where they put their set pieces. There's also this tab, the analyst report, which I find really, really beneficial. It tells you what Liverpool have been like in their most recent games against Crystal Palace. We know the formations they're going to play. We know where they're weak and where they're strong. Sometimes it will highlight a player that maybe loses possession a lot. Take Jobberslai here and you think, okay, maybe we can press him a little bit more. Realistically, with Dominic, it's probably because he's making loads of passes and some of them are going to go wrong. But if you've got a big game coming up, or if you want to do this before every game, maybe a day before, just take a look at your next opposition, read through the information, and I promise you, I'm pretty pretty much every time you do this, you'll find just one little snippet of information that can help your team out, could give you that 2% edge in the next game that could be the difference between you winning the match and losing the match, winning the league and losing the league. All of this information is here for you, and it's so easy to access. You don't need to know anything about all these kinds of graphs, which I know can be quite confusing. Use the overview, use the analyst report, and you'll get plenty of information. Even just this top line here, we know Liverpool prefer in-swinging deliveries to the far post, so we can start to develop our defensive set-piece routine based on that ahead of the Liverpool game. It might not make a difference, it might make a big difference. We don't know without trying, but we've got this information for a reason, and it would be a big mistake just to ignore it because it's a little bit scary and it's an area of the game that we don't normally look at. So that's what I would suggest to you guys. Make sure you don't discount the data hub, and that is the 5th mistake that I think a lot of people are making in Football Manager. If you did enjoy the video, smash the like button for us, subscribe for more, and come check out my channel, linked in the description should you want to. Let me know your biggest mistakes in the comments down below, but most of all, have a great day everybody, and I'll see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.